Do animals have emotion? That was a question I asked my class of students many years ago, but not that long ago, maybe 6-7 years ago, in an animal issues class discussing what animals feel. And the group of roughly 50 students all laughed as if that was an absurd question. Well, let me tell you a story. My favorite mare, Tari, had a bestie, her best friend, Bella, out in the large pasture where we kept our horses, and it was clear that they were very close socially, always together. And one day I had to go get Tari out of the pasture. After I haltered Tari and led her to the gate, Bella followed us the entire way, and I had to kind of shoo Bella off to get Tari out of the gate and close it behind me. Both started experiencing some nervousness, agitated behavior. Tari was turning to want to be back with Bella. And then the farther we got down the lane, Bella was neighing that distress, and Tari neighed back. It was clear they were starting to suffer what we consider separation anxiety. Well, I had worked on Tari and brought her back. As we got near the pasture, she neighed her greeting neigh, and Bella came running up to the fence. And as we got closer, they were nickering, both excited to see each other. Tari was pulling me a little bit, and I had to hang on a little bit tight as I got her in. And then as I turned her to face me to take off the halter and let her loose, I knew she would be excited and got out of the way. And the next thing I knew, her and Bella were taking off down the pasture, and almost a full gallop, it seemed like. And you could just see the excitement of being reunited, hearing their nickers as they got close. And I just watched them for a while to see what they would do. They settled down and they stayed close to each other, and Tari grazed a little bit, and then they started to groom each other. They were reestablishing that tight social bond that they had. But was that a clear sign of happiness? Can horses be happy? Can they display behaviors that we consider happy? Of course they can.
And Secretariat being led, he is numbering
the horse.
And the horse is the best thing in the world, isn't it? So I suppose I've always loved them, really, ever since I was a little girl.
Everybody's in line, and they're off. Secretariat away very well, has good position.
The love.
Oh, I never thought owning a horse could mean so much to me.
And Secretariat now taking the lead.
The madness.
What kind of a horse is that? I've never seen a horse like that before.
Lightning now. He is moving like a tremendous machine.
Their story.
Mustang is more involved in the early development of this breed than I thought they were, but they were.
Secretariat has opened a 22-length lead. He is going to be the Triple Crown winner.
Welcome to Mad About Horses.
Hello, I'm Dr. Chris Mortensen. I've been an equine educator and scientist for over 20 years. And in this episode of Mad About Horses we're going to talk about signs that your horse is happy. What is happiness? What kind of emotions do they express? What does the science say? Can they feel these emotions? How do they express them to you? What are the signs? And what are the owner's perceptions of their horses being happy? I mean, we're going to cover all that and more today. And just to open up, do animals feel? And I remember that class like it was yesterday. It's just one of those moments in my career where it was like, it really stuck with me that, wow, these students who were a mix of animal scientists, meat scientists, but also horse enthusiasts, pre-veterinary students, you know, do animals have emotions? And this wasn't 20 years ago when I started my career. This was just recently. And I know we're very careful to what we call in behavioral science, this concept of anthropomorphism. And that's really the attribution of human characteristics to animals, to the behavior of animals. How complex are these emotions? How complex are their thought processes? They're definitely not in line with human thought and emotion, but through science, through behavioral studies, we now know these animals are much more complex than we thought easily 100 years ago. But I'm just talking in the last 10, 20 years. Science and studies have shown that animals are much more complex than we give them credit for. Anybody around horses knows horses do display emotion. They display fear. I mean, dogs do. And I always use our dogs as examples because they live in our homes. We're around them a lot. Or cats are just kind of, they don't care. Anybody that owns cats. But cats have emotions too, obviously. So the same thing with horses. Horses are very perceptive. And we're going to talk about that more in depth today. But just fear. Fear is the basic emotion. You can say most animals have some sort of fear. Flight or fight response. We talked about it last week in the horse communication podcast. Anything with horse training, I mean, that is a basic emotion that most animals, or mammals at least, can experience and show. We can see that response. So then you do the 180 of why couldn't they be happy? If they can show fear, they should show some sort of happiness or content behaviors. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're not, putting them on the level of humans, but our understanding of animals today is so much different. I mean, we are even in our discussions talking about animals having culture, which some people, they can't even imagine that. But quick example, killer whales, one of the most intelligent animals on Earth, they have what scientists are describing now as culture, where the grandmothers are teaching the young calves how to hunt. Things like wave washing seals off icebergs, or whales beaching themselves off the coasts of South America to catch seals. The grandmothers are teaching the young calves how to do that. And then finding out these whales have different dialects and different speech patterns. And science is so incredible. And applying that to horses, what we know about them is incredible. And yes, horses can feel joy, can feel happiness. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways we can look at that. A study published just 5 years ago in Applied Animal Behavioral Science. This was a paper done by a bunch of authors out of the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and it's titled Assessing Equine Emotional State. And in there, they talk about how the study of animal behavior is increasing our knowledge, and we're still at the early stages of understanding this, especially with horses. So the bottom line of the study is we definitely need more research in this area. We definitely need more equine behavioral research away from the training aspects, but more in the general day-to-day behaviors and in a context of welfare, right? It's a big part of owning animals today is animal welfare. It doesn't matter where you live on the planet. Animal welfare is a concern of everybody, and especially when it comes to horses and large animals. In the study, they talk about horses having, or animals in general, having subjective emotional experiences, and they characterize it according to valence, which means they're either a positive or negative emotion, reward or punishment, pleasant or unpleasant. So it's really kind of a black and white, right? Yes or no type experience. Then I think science is trying to find where are those gray areas, right? So we know horses can experience fear. We know horses can experience what we would call joy or happiness. And now science is trying to get into those gray areas. Could horses be a little bit agitated, but kind of hiding it from you? You wouldn't know. They're just kind of like, okay, I'll get through this. Okay. How deep does that rabbit hole go, right? That's really where science is going with this. Now, just to kind of, before we get into the happiness, talk about when a horse isn't happy. We'll go to the negative experiences with valence, and that's stress. My PhD research was looking at stress and its effects on reproduction and the health of the animal. And we know stress is bad. Stress is bad for any animal. Stress is bad for us. It's bad for them. So we have ways of evaluating stress in horses. Just one of the things we did is just look at cortisol levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone that in the fight or flight response, or when we're stressed, either acutely, meaning a short-term stress, or a prolonged chronic stress, cortisol is one of the hormones that helps the body prepare for the fight or flight response, increases heart rate, respiration rate, is going to drive energy and oxygen to muscles so the animal can get away quickly and have that superhuman or super animal strength that we sometimes see. So we look at that. We look at that stress hormone, but that's just one little marker. Oxytocin's another hormone now that's becoming more studied, that in stressful situations, horses may release some of it. Or, what does that mean? So look at these biomarkers is in general what we're looking at. So we can identify when an animal is stressed. We can identify when a horse is not happy. That's clear as day. It's how do we tell if they are happy? How do we know? How do we know that they're content with their lives and what we're asking of them to do? Or during competitions, are they happy or are they stressed? So that's where the science is really going with this. Assessing the equine emotional state, one of the things that really stuck out with me is the evolution of the social structure of horses. We talked about evolution as one of the very first podcasts in Mad About Horses, and that's because you just need to understand how these animals came to be to what they are today. But the evolution of social bonds, the herd, has been critical to their survivability. So in the wild, you have a band of mares with a resident stallion and young horses, young males, and then the foals. And then you also rarely have a lone stallion. Most of the time, stallions are going to form what's called bachelor herds because horses are gregarious animals. They want to be around other horses or other animals because it helps them survive. Now, in that evolution of sociality in horses, they have learned to read each other. Are you stressed or are you happy? So this empathetic type response we see in horses, we see in other animals. There's been studies done in mice. Mice, you would think, if you're thinking of just basic instincts, how complex do mice brain activity compared to, say, a primate like us? But they had studies where mice were showing fear and other types of behavioral responses when they saw another mouse experiencing adverse stimuli. If they saw another mouse being fearful, they would become fearful too, as a survival mechanism, like, something's not good, I better respond to it too, or I'm next, right? So if, I'm being chased by, and we had lions on the plains of Americas thousands of years ago, or even cheetahs in Americas chasing wild horses, or, plains of Asia and other parts of the world where they live. If the herd's fearful, running for a predator, I pick up on that really quickly and I'm running too because I want to survive. So it's interesting to think about horses have evolved over these millions of years, and they have evolved these complex behaviors that we have to interpret, right? That's our job as companions to horses, is interpret their behaviors so we can provide them with the best lives possible. The other interesting aspect of scientific research, and then I'm going to get into some of the fun parts of recognizing why your horse is happy. They are developing a qualitative behavioral assessment for horses, and this has been going on for the last decade or so. This is behavioral research looking at it from the animal's perspective. So just to talk about the growth of science and how exciting it's getting, that we're able to go in and understand behavior and emotion more in depth. From what we historically have considered animals as just running on instinct, we know that's not true. We know they're much more complex than we viewed them 100 years ago. Putting all that together, so really one of the best ways we can evaluate today a horse's happiness is their behavior in responses to stimuli. That's us or other horses or other animals. And it all starts with body language. If you're trying to identify if your horse is happy or not, you've got to be able to learn how to read a horse's body language. Now, we covered that in the previous podcast on communication, but just to recap some of that. One of the best pieces of advice you can have as a horse owner is you need to get eyes on your animal or somebody if you're out of town or you're paying for your animal to be stabled, whoever's managing it, they need to look at that animal every single day. Because if they're in distress or they have an injury or something like that, you've got to be able to read their body language to identify that so they can get veterinary care. So it's always a great idea to get your eyes on the animal every day. If they're on your property, I always say twice a day, morning and evening, and just look at their body language. Are they relaxed? Are they being social? I mean, we know, going a few podcasts back, talking about what horses do each day, 65% of the day, if they're out on a big pasture, they should be foraging. Or if they're in a large paddock with hay, they should be eating most of the day. If they're in their stalls, in a future podcast, we'll talk about extending that feeding time, but most of the day, horses are meant to be eating because of their smaller stomachs and their digestive system, the way it's set up. That is what they're meant to do. But when you look at them, let's just say a horse out on pasture or in a paddock, are they relaxed? Are they eating? Do they not look depressed or lethargic as they walk or move? Does it look natural and free-flowing? Are they with their other herd mates, or is the horse isolated, off in the corner of a pasture where all the other horses are at the other end? They should be together, right? And a normal behavior. Are they not aggressive to, say, a Tari and Bella? Is Tari being aggressive to Bella all of a sudden? That's abnormal for her. So that would be an indication something's not quite right. So to see if your animal's happy from a distance, just look, are they doing natural behaviors? Do they look relaxed? Are they moving freely? Are they with herd mates or their pasture companions? Because remember, it's tough. It takes a trained eye to identify these, maybe things aren't quite right, because horses are so good at hiding pain because, again, not want to show a predator, hey, I'm weak. If something's nagging, it might not show it. So it always comes back to what's normal behavior for your horse. You know your animal best. You're spending the most time with them. What is normal for them? Then if something's abnormal, you will be able to pick it up. And then that's when you know your horse isn't happy. But if they're exhibiting normal behaviors, you assume they're content. They're happy. Everything's great. Plenty of food, hopefully some sunshine, having a great chat with my friend Bella or whoever, they're grooming each other and they're content and happy in life. Now, veterinarians have a very excellent trained eye for visual assessment. And whenever I talk about a veterinarian, their ability to detect some sort of infirmity, and that's something they learn in vet school, but then just over time, seeing this over and over and seeing unwell animals, they see a lot of unwell animals because that's their job. Their job is to make the animal well. So they're able to go out and look and say, oh, it looks fine, looks normal. Or they can come out and look for things like lesions on the skin or disease. Is there snotty noses? Are they labored breathing? Little things that sometimes we don't pick up on. Sometimes your veterinarian can pick up on it. So they're very well trained in detecting any sort of abnormality or, things like lameness. one thing that they're always picking up on is watching the horses walk back and forth. If you are having any sort of, things don't seem quite right, it's always worth a phone call, speak to your veterinarian. Maybe they can come out and do a visual assessment. Now, some other signs in body language that you might want to be looking for to see if your horse is happy. The animal is calm. These are, again, fight or flight, herbivores, evolved to evade predators. When things aren't quite right, they're not going to be calm. So approaching them, they should appear calm and content. And the big one is the ears. We always can go back to the ears, the barometer of a horse's mood. Pinned back, not happy, relaxed to the side, or, telescoping around, or, even a kind of alert stance as you approach, they're tuned into you. Those are all signs that the horse is fine, and there's nothing negative with that. But if the ears are pinned back, that is definitely negative. And then the other thing we talked about, which is so important, is facial expressions. And this is where equine behavior is really expanding. Looking at the facial expressions of horses and what that means. Really, and I introduced this in the last podcast, and I knew I was going to talk about it again in this podcast, but facial expressions and oxytocin as possible markers of positive emotion in horses. And this, again, was a Nature paper. This is one of the 5th most cited journals in the world, scientific reports in Nature. So it's exciting to see a horse paper in there, especially horse behavior. But looking at the facial expressions during gentle grooming versus standard grooming. So if you didn't listen to that podcast, what we were talking about was the horse's response to a gentle grooming situation versus standard. And when you groom a horse, you have a set of brushes and a curry comb. You have really stiff brushes, you have softer bristle brushes, and then you have a curry comb, which helps some of those areas where there's dirt and grime. Standard grooming, the way I've learned, always be careful around bony areas, but it's a hide. The horse can kind of take some of that brushing. Where gentle grooming, they were just gently grooming them. Anytime any avoidance behavior, they moved on to something else. So they weren't really aggressive with the grooming. And the horses during standard grooming had some avoidance behavior. They were not happy. They captured these facial expressions of the horse not being happy, and they called it this grimace scale that they now quantify in horses. And this was Emanuela Della Costa, who's kind of known for this, and first published in 2015, developing the horse grimace scale for pain and a pain assessment. So quantifying negative emotion, not just cortisol or some of the more crude biomarkers that we look at, but also looking at facial expressions. So grimacing in horses is a thing. Orbital tightening, that's like their eyes. Strained chewing muscles, strained nostrils or flattening the nostrils. Obviously the eyes, the pinned eyes or back eyes, tension above the eyes, all things that are associated with grimacing. And then we're going to try to look at positive facial expressions, which shows when they're happy, right? Because we've got the reverse of it. We've got the bad stuff, but the good stuff or the good facial expression. So in this paper, looking at things that you can tell if a horse is happy is those relaxed ears. The lips are extended forward and twitching a little bit. And you've seen, like, if you scratch a horse and they have that moment of just like, oh, that feels so good. And their lips twitching, their necks are relaxed, their head posture's down, eyes half closed. Those are your happy horses when they look relaxed and content versus wide-eyed, neck high, alert ears, tension. That's not a happy horse. We reverse that. That's your happy horse. And then that's what we're seeing. And again, that eye softness is what we want to look at, or half closed, relaxed. The wrinkles in the eyes is something that they're trying to quantify in this scale of positive or negative facial expression. So increased eye wrinkles can mean that the horse is nervous, worried, where there is really no eye wrinkles when a horse is relaxed and content. And again, the whites of the eye, that's a negative. You don't want to see the whites of the eye. Now, the equine facial action coding system, Equifax, is in development. So there's been some research in this just published in the last few years out of the UK and the US by authors there and behavioral researchers, that they're talking about it's not just vocalizations where we're looking at these facial expressions and what they're telling us. So this was a really interesting study. They've developed this facial action coding system in other species. So it started with humans because we have all these facial muscles, right? And we can read people. We've developed it. Then we've gone down to other primates. So in chimpanzees, orangutans, macaques, done it in dogs, done it in cats. Now they're trying to develop this system for horses. The horse has a lot of facial muscles that controls not just chewing and things like that, but like I said, the ears have 21 different muscles that help control the ears, the nostrils, the lips, the jaw. And so what they're trying to do is quantify the system that you can look at the facial expression of a horse and say, are they happy or are they sad? So we've talked about the ears. That's a part of this. We've talked about the lips, but also the nostrils. Again, those nostrils are relaxed, soft, or rounded, not flared. Flared nostrils is like, ooh, not happy, but just relaxed. The jaws, just loose, not tense. When we carry a lot of tension in our jaw, when we're stressed or, exercising or something like that, just ever notice when you try to relax your body, always think about your jaw and your teeth. And you want that to be relaxed. You don't want any tension there. Well, horses carry tension in their jaws too. So again, a relaxed horse is a happy horse. And that's a big takeaway in body language and then also looking at facial expression. So if you're asking yourself, is my horse happy? Look at that. Look at their faces. Look at their body language. That's going to tell you quite a lot. Another aspect of a happy horse is their vocalizations. In the horse communication, we played some of those. So one of the best is the nicker. It's a greeting. It's a happy emotional vocalization. It's, mare and foal, Tari and Bella, best buds. Nickering is a positive vocalization with our horses. A groan, that could be relaxed. That could be happy, like, oh, long day. Oh, just did a big trail ride. I'm stretching. Oh, it feels good. Got some exercise, got some of those good endorphins, and now I get to relax. And they groan. So they do vocalize to express their emotional state. It's a big part of being a horse. Vocalization is. They're generally not that noisy, but they do have subtle sounds, nickers, warning sounds, could be a squeal or distressful sounds, neighing, but neighing can be also good, right? So it's just be aware of what those vocalizations mean, but generally the nickering, the groaning, those are usually associated with positivity, with horses' positive vocalizations. Another aspect of a horse being happy is healthy social relationships. Again, already talked about that. Incredibly social species. Just that story of Tari and Bella, it's very important to them. So things like, I talked about mutual grooming, but being by each other, standing by each other, not being aggressive, no aggressive behaviors towards each other, not guarding resources like, oh, this is mine. That's happy, healthy horse is going to be friendly and have those tight social bonds. And that just brings to management. How do we ensure they're happy? Well, first of all, always understand horses are incredibly perceptive And I've got a couple studies that's going to talk about that. These are really fun. Just here in a minute. But proper management, listen to this podcast because we're going to talk a lot about that, but understanding them, understanding their story. That's why we start with their history and go from there. But they need a proper diet is huge. That's a massive part of management. And when you go to equine conferences, the majority of it's on nutrition because that is such an important aspect of how we manage them today. And our understanding of equine nutrition today is so different than even when I started my career 20 years ago or 30, 40, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, where we are today in nutrition. It's incredible what we know. So that's important. Horses need daily exercise. They need to get out if they're stalled. We, in the behavioral podcast talked about horses needing hours and hours of outside time and exercise. So those are all things you can implement. Sociality. These are incredibly social animals. They need companionship. They need to be around you and other horses if they can. So there are a lot of studies that have looked at this. One I find really fascinating is when we talk about our behavior with our horses. And whenever teaching students or anybody that's never been around horses, you've got to be relaxed. You've got to be calm. If you're agitated, if you're upset, your horse is going to pick up on that quickly. And then they're going to take on those emotions because, again, they're evaluating their environment constantly for threats. So horses are able to perceive our emotions. And how does that make them feel? Well, one study that I'm going to highlight and go through real quick to explain this was published in Animals just a few years ago. And horses categorize human emotions based on facial expressions and nonverbal vocalizations. So just to give you the gist of this study, they put these horses in big box stalls, and then they flashed videos. So the horse was 2 meters plus away from the pictures. They also did nonverbal vocalizations of a human expressing joy or anger. So they looked at the pictures and then they looked at the vocalizations. And then what was really funny, they'd play them together and then they would do a negative or a anger face with a joy vocalization. So they mixed it up to see how the horses would react, right? So you'd have a picture of an angry person. Then you'd have a picture of an angry person with an angry nonverbal vocalization. Then you'd have a picture of a happy person, and a picture of the happy person and the happy vocalization. And then they would do a happy face with a negative vocalization, and then an angry face with a happy vocalization to confuse the animals, just to see and test, how intelligent they are, how they were able to interpret. And when the negative human emotions, pictures, and vocalizations were shown, they had the greatest increase in heart rate and agitative behaviors. When they showed the happy people faces and the happy vocalizations, the horses were really relaxed and content and seemed happy. When they did the mix, the horses were confused. They didn't know how to react. So it took them a while, but then they kind of erred on the side of caution and were a little bit not happy, right? The horse wasn't quite happy. So just to summarize everything the authors found, they state these results suggest that horses can match visual and vocal cues for the same emotion and can perceive the emotional valence of human nonverbal vocalizations. So that valence, going back to the very beginning of this podcast, positive, negative. Again, your horses are perceptive, period. They're very perceptive. And so if you're having a bad day or you're angry or you're not happy, the horse is going to take on that emotion. They are going to perceive that. So anytime you're with them, and anybody that's been around horses long enough, you do get frustrated There are moments where you're just like, oh my goodness, why am I in love with these animals so much? We've all experienced it. Walk away, calm down. You never push it with training. I've chased horses around pastures, especially as a young student, not understanding why I can't catch that horse and getting so frustrated. It's easy. I was frustrated. So then the horse is like, I ain't going near you. I'll just run circles around you. And that's what they did. And then I learned in my career, oh, you got to be calm and approachable. And now when I go to catch horses, it's very rare a horse will run for me and bolt. In general, if you're calm, your horse is calm. If you're agitated, your horse is going to get agitated. So always take a break. So I would tell you, don't be hard on yourself. You're only human. We all get frustrated. We've all been there, but take a break. Get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a cup, just some water. Go back, calm, collected, and your animal will be calm and collected. So that's kind of what the research is telling us. Now, to switch all this up and to kind of take this podcast home, I found a very fun study. Owner perception of horse happiness. Let's switch that up. Now, we know there's a ton of studies of emotional well-being of horse owners, right? Of being around animals, being around horses. It enhances our lives. It gives us longevity. There are so many benefits of horse ownership and being around these animals all the time. This study is specifically asking, do you think your horses are happy? And this was a study out of Canada, Australia, and the UK. And it was a survey that they sent out to a bunch of horse owners. And they've got about 350 surveys back. And these were horse owners, and they were asked, do you think your horses are happy? 94% of the respondents said yes, their horse is happy. And then 6% said they weren't sure or the horse wasn't happy. Then they asked, in your opinion, how happy is your horse in general? Very happy was just over 41%. Somewhat happy was 46%. Less than 3% was either somewhat unhappy or very unhappy was 1%. And then I don't know was another 4%. So overall, the majority of horse owners felt their horses were happy. When they asked, describe in a few words how you know your horse is happy, they did a word cloud analysis. They did the 30 most frequently mentioned words. The biggest one that stood out was ear. So obviously, these owners were reading the horse's ear position, saying, okay, relaxed ears, alert ears, telescoping ears, they're not pinned was a big one. Eye seemed to be the second biggest that popped out. Then willingness, body language was a big one. That was number 3. Facial expression, soft eyes, signs of stress, aggressive behavior, and then they kind of go down, relaxed muscle, positive body language, lack of tension. So those were some of the big words that popped out. Now they asked them, do you believe your horses are happy when you interact with them? Close to 92% said yes. 3%, less than 3% said no. Do you believe your horses are happy when you ride them? 69% said yes. 17% said no, and then no response was 14%. So they were probably unsure. Do they like me on the back riding them or not? But most said happy. Horses are willing to work. Well, then that was the next question. Do you believe your horses are happy when you work them? 80% said yes. 10% said no, and 9% had no response, a little bit over 9%. So that shows that horse owners in general think horses are happy when they're out working, exercising, and we know that these animals have been domesticated for this, selected for this willingness to work for 5,000 plus years. It is something they want to do. They want to exercise. They want to work, and they want that relationship with you. Now, I really, the next couple ones this was really fun to read. And again, this word cloud analysis. If you could change one factor in your horse's lives to increase or improve their happiness, what would it be? So if you think about it, what could you do to your horse to make them happier? What's the one thing in your mind, oh, if I did this, it would make them happier? I would challenge you, if you can, make that change. But this is what the other owner said. Paddock, turnout, grass, pasture, time. Those were the big ones. Then horse or paddock mate, larger paddock, less mud, pops out in my, I see that one's funny. Bigger area, increased turnout, bigger pasture, positive reinforcement. Those are all things horse owners think they can do to increase the happiness of their horse. Now, sometimes you can't do that, financially, or you just can't. But I would challenge you. What's one thing you could do to make your horse happier? What's that you can do? And then do it. Make them happier. Now, to finish this off, if we could ask the horse, what's one change in their lives that they could do to increase or improve their happiness, what do you think they would say? Biggest word is horse. So think of the other horses. Time. More time with you. We're busy owning and managing horses and riding horses. And if that's not your 9-to-5 job, then you have to find time to go spend time with your horse. But then the other things that the horse could ask, they would say turnout, paddock, larger paddock, pasture, food, grass, interaction, a bigger herd, treats. That's a big one on there. Treats. Yeah. Paddock mate, less work. If your horse could say, hey, could you please do this for me? And if you can do it, do it. Think about it. You want them to be happy, right? But my takeaway from that study is, and just my experience working with horse owners, not just students, but going around the United States or even around the world, talking to horse owners, they are very sophisticated, very intelligent, willing to learn and willing to make adjustments that's in the interest of their animal, in the best interest of their horse. And I just want to say to all of you listening, if you own horses, I know you're doing the best you can. I just want to say from my experience, I know you're a great owner, especially if you're listening to this podcast. You're a fantastic owner, but great job. Good job taking care of them, and keep doing what you're doing. I know you're trying to improve yourselves and improve the lives of your animals, but from the bottom of my heart, from loving these animals as much as I do, and why I do this podcast and why I'm so passionate about education is to make the world better for horses and their horse owners. And you're doing that. So great job. All right, that was a fun one. It just thinking about a horse happy makes me smile. Like I'm grinning ear to ear right now, and hopefully you are too. There is a good article, How to Tell If Your Horse is Happy, on the Mad Barn website, madbarn.com. You can go follow up this podcast with that. It's a great little article about just some of the signs that we talked about and a little bit more. So, just a reminder, there's just a ton of articles on there for any interest. And I know over 90% of you listening haven't posted a review yet. I'm just asking, if you've enjoyed any of these episodes, please subscribe and rate this podcast on your favorite app. It does make a huge difference. It impacts how many horse owners we can reach with this information. And as this podcast gets bigger, it's going to help us provide more education across different types of platforms. We're talking not just YouTube, but some other things in development. So when you do rate and review and give us 5 stars, it motivates us to keep doing this, but also to branch out, to find more modes of education. Because like I said, horse owners are sophisticated, you're very intelligent, and you're always looking for information, and it just means the world to us. So thank you for those that have given us reviews so far. And if you haven't, if you don't mind just taking a minute doing that, and then also sharing on social media is so huge for a podcast. If you really enjoyed this episode, if you don't mind sharing it in a Facebook group or an Instagram post or TikTok or wherever you interact with other horse owners. Word of mouth. That's how podcasts grow, and it will help us a lot. Also follow us on social media. Look for Mad Barn on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. The website, madbarn.com. Again, that Learn tab. Tons of resources for you. And any questions, any comments, or any topics that you want to learn more about, you can always email me, podcast@madbarn.com. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned for another great episode coming your way next week.